told me she didn't want to die.
One girl's journey from terror to triumph.
She has a big spirit, and I think that she's going to do big things.
Plus, a man has visions of his past, memories of a little girl. Where was she now? His older sister holds the key.
I was just afraid for my life, and even now, speaking to you, I'm afraid for my life.
The secret in the closet. And a young mother killed while her toddler watched, and her own mother's surprising decision.
I serve an amazing God, Bobby.
The power of forgiveness. Welcome to 2020 on ID. I'm John Quinones. It's hard to imagine moving on after suffering a life-altering trauma. Yet each of the characters you're about to meet did just that. First, Brittany Bergeron. Her life was shattered one night when she was just 10 years old. An unspeakable horror ripped away everything she had ever known. But as Juju Chang first reported in 2009, it would also be the start of a life she never could have imagined.
Las Vegas, it's known as Sin City, but even the town that glorifies debauchery was shocked by the brutality of a pair of teenagers. They committed a crime so heinous, it made even Vegas weep.
This crime deeply affected people. It floored the community.
Just after 1 o'clock this morning, Mesquite police received a call about a staff.
It was a cold desert night in January 2003. 80 miles north of Las Vegas. 10-year-old Brittany Bergeron was left alone in her trailer with her 3-year-old sister Christiana, while her mother was off playing slot machines at the nearby Casablanca casino. The girls were watching TV as two strangers were heading to their trailer, 19-year-old Bo Myastis and his 16-year-old sister Monique. It wasn't the first time the girls had been left home alone. For the first 10 years of her life, a nasty divorce and custody battle sent Brittany packing from one dysfunctional parent back to the other.
It felt like I didn't really have a home. Like I was just kind of a toy being tossed back and forth.
Brittany's mother, Tammy, was usually unemployed and often on drugs. She'd been busted for methamphetamines and was repeatedly in and out of court-ordered rehab. Brittany's dad had done time for DUI. Over the years, their bigger custody battles led to harassment charges and restraining orders. By 2003, Tammy had a new boyfriend, Robert Schmidt, and they took Brittany and her half-sister Christiana to live in the small desert gambling town of Mesquite, Nevada. Their shabby home, a run-down trailer parked in a parking lot on the grounds of a casino.
She was a tragedy waiting to happen.
John L. Smith has written about Brittany in the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Those children went to bed hungry many nights. They spent many days going to neighboring trailers asking for food.
While the girls went hungry, Tammy and Schmidt were usually gambling, spending, according to police, $18,000 in 2 months. A neighbor said they seemed high most of the time.
Tammy and Bobby, they slammed it, which is injecting it directly into your blood vein.
On cold evenings, the two little girls would spend hours in the laundry room just to stay warm. More often than not, 10-year-old Brittany was left to fend for herself and take care of 3-year-old Christiana, or as Brittany called her, Kissy.
I fed her, I made sure she got to bed, I made sure she had clean clothes, I made sure if she got hurt, I cleaned her up, I gave her a bandage. I was there to play with her. And
it sounds like you were almost her mother.
A little bit.
She was forced to be the parent. She was forced to be the grown-up at 10 years old.
And those two teenagers closing in on the trailer? They too came from a family destroyed by drugs and depravity.
It's two sides of the same coin. The Myastises were absolutely abused and neglected.
For Monique, reports of sexual abuse. For Bo, thoughts of suicide. Their father, a convicted murderer, was in prison for most of their lives, and in fact conceived Bo and Monique while on weekend furloughs. That night, they were already high on drugs. When they ran out, they bought $125 of what they thought was methamphetamine from Brittany's mother and her boyfriend. The trouble was, Bo later testified, they'd been ripped off. It wasn't meth, he says, just table salt. Security cameras captured Bo hunting down Brittany's mother in the casino. He later admitted to police that he confronted her.
I went back and I asked the lady, and she said, hey, look, this is salt. I'd like my money back. And I told her, look, you don't want this to get ugly.
After reports of some pushing and shoving, security stepped in and asked Bo and Monique to leave.
Still pissed because I need to get the money.
Short-changed and short-tempered, Bo and Monique plot their violent revenge in the casino parking lot. Now they need to score weapons and come up with a getaway plan.
They were headed down their road to hell when they met up with Brittany.
It's now 1:20 in the morning. In the next half hour, they arm themselves with kitchen knives and head to the trailer where Brittany is watching television and 3-year-old Kissy is fast asleep. Bo Myastis, like the big bad wolf come to life, knocks on the door.
So I opened the door and there was a guy there. And he was like, your mom's hurt at the casino, your dad doesn't want to leave her. And I'm like, well, I don't go with people I don't know. And I shut the door and I locked it.
Then his sister Monique takes over the ruse and knocks on the door again.
And she's like, hi, my name's Kim. Your mom's really hurt at the casino. Your dad doesn't want to leave her and he asked us to come get you. And I'm like, okay, well, you're going to have to carry my sister because she's asleep. And I turned around and a guy came up behind me and put his hand over my mouth and a knife to my neck. And then he sat me down on our couch bed and I blacked out.
While Bo stabs tiny Christiana, Monique viciously stabs Brittany more than 20 times in her arms, chest, back, and legs.
I woke up and then the first thing I thought was, oh my gosh, my legs are cut off. I couldn't feel them. And then I tried to get up and I couldn't because this arm had been chipped and fractured. And so I looked over at my sister and I could hear like gurgling and drowning in something. And I didn't at the time know what it was.
3-year-old Kissy, stabbed nearly a dozen times, is barely hanging on to life. Bo and Monique run from the blood-soaked trailer to their getaway car.
And then I tried to get over there and I couldn't really move. So I started screaming, help, help, help. And then I saw lights. And so I freaked out and I went quiet. And I thought it was them coming back for something.
But it was Brittany's mother, Tammy, returning home from the casino.
And my mom got out and saw the door open and started screaming and crying.
A neighbor called casino security, who called the police. Officer Bradley Swanson was the first to arrive. Christiana, still breathing, was outside the trailer in the arms of her grandmother, who lived nearby.
I then entered the trailer where Brittany was laying on the floor in just a huge puddle of blood. And just screaming everywhere I saw. There was a stab wound. She looked me right in the eyes and told me she didn't want to die.
Then I remember paramedics telling my mom to hold towels and rags and stuff on my wounds, and I remember it hurting and saying, stop, stop, it hurts. And then I remember seeing my grandma holding my sister and her foot was kind of hanging off and she was covered in blood, and they took her first.
After that, Brittany remembers an ambulance ride and then the sound of a helicopter. As the chopper rushes her to a Las Vegas trauma center, she still can't feel her legs and remembers being cold and tired. But mostly, she's worried about the fate of her little sister. Their lives in the hands of trauma doctors who are waiting.
Coming up, Brittany battles her worst fears.
I was afraid that it was going to happen again. That, someone was going to come get me.
And across town, a ray of hope.
And I told Judy, I said, you'll be getting a call. And sure enough, they called.
Stay with us.
As a helicopter raced Brittany Bergeron to a Las Vegas trauma center, she wondered why she couldn't feel her legs. But mostly, she was frantically worried about her 3-year-old sister, Kissy. The two girls had just been brutally stabbed by a pair of teenagers, angry, they say, about a drug deal gone bad with their mother. As the chopper landed, doctors say Brittany wouldn't focus on her own grave injuries. She just kept asking about her little sister. A team of trauma surgeons and ER nurses worked to save both girls. After hours of surgery, Brittany regained consciousness.
And then I woke up in the hospital and I had a tube down my nose and staples and everywhere, and I had a cast on my arm and there were cards all over my room.
Her little sister Kissy had been stabbed repeatedly in the head and neck.
I remember the whole time I was in the hospital, I kept asking, "Where's Kissy? Where's Kissy?"
Kissy never made it out of surgery that night. Fearing added shock to Brittany, no one had the heart to tell her.
And I remember my mom telling me, "Oh, she's fine, she's in another room." But I remember them being there with me all the time.
It didn't take long for Brittany to realize the truth.
What were you thinking about when they told you?
I was sad, and I wondered why nobody told me, and everybody just kind of kept it away from me.
Brittany tried to save her sister. Many of the wounds that she suffered were wounds that were suffered while trying to protect her sister.
Doctors told Brittany that her spinal cord had been severed. Not only had she lost her little sister in the senseless attack, she'd lost the use of her legs. Brittany would spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. Without Kissy for comfort, Brittany had to begin her long road to recovery.
It was hard. It was weird because I didn't have her there and sitting there and, always laughing with me, and she always followed me and wanted to do everything I wanted to do.
After fleeing the scene of their devastation, Bo and Monique Myastis showered at their grandmother's house and stole her white Honda Accord. They head out of town. They tossed their bloody clothes off the side of the road and headed north on I-15 from Nevada to Utah. Police issued an alert. Within 5 hours, they were arrested. This video shows them actually being captured 260 miles from the crime scene. Bo quickly confessed.
Did you grab the girls? Did you hit them?
I didn't hit them, no, I stabbed them, no.
He tried to shield his little sister, not unlike the way Brittany had fiercely defended hers. He claimed that Monique played no role in the attack, but soon it became clear that the 16-year-old had joined her big brother in the bloodbath.
District Court, Clark County, Nevada.
It requires you to do a little soul searching.
In a Las Vegas criminal court, Bo Myastis faced a jury of his peers 3 years after killing Kissy. Because he'd confessed and pled guilty to murder, the only question the jury would decide was whether he'd be sentenced to death.
Our jurors should be the ones who can consider the death penalty.
Bo and Monique's older sister Misty shed some light as to why the pair might have sought revenge by going after defenseless children. She testified that their parents had once said, "If you want to get back at somebody, you get them where it counts. You hurt their kids." Monique also pled guilty.
She felt that it was in her best interest to go ahead and take the life with the possibility of parole sentence.
The district attorney told jurors that Bo lacked remorse. He even wrote to his sister in a jailhouse letter that he, quote, confessed to slaughtering those little piggies, end quote. Then it was up to the jury.
As to Bo Myastis, and as to count 4, by virtue of the jury's finding, the death penalty is imposed.
With the murderers behind bars, Brittany still struggles to regain her life. Her mother, Tammy, was facing neglect charges and was deemed incompetent by the court to take care of her. So who would take care of this traumatized little girl in a wheelchair?
She put it in a big dish because there's a lot of it.
If there were railroad tracks through Las Vegas, Bill and Judy Himmel would live on the other side. A well-to-do electrician and housewife, they had fostered dozens of special needs children. Like everyone in Las Vegas, the Himmels were riveted by Brittany's story.
What was your reaction to the news of how she'd been attacked?
Horror.
But she fought.
Oh, yeah.
And she tried to protect her sister.
That's why she was stabbed in the back. She was wrapped around her sister, and they stabbed her in her back.
From a news report, the couple, who'd won awards for being great foster parents, learned that Brittany had left the hospital and moved to a rehab center. That's when they got the call from the Department of Family Services.
We were watching that, and I told Judy, I said, you'll be getting a call. And sure enough, they called, and we went to rehab and met her and took her in.
Brittany fit right into their home with 2 adopted children and 4 foster children. But the family included 4 grown biological kids and assorted nephews, nieces, and cousins.
There's an energy in that house, there's a happiness in that house, and there's a kindness in that house that isn't present everywhere and certainly wasn't in Brittany's life.
The kids have always given us so much more than we could have ever given them.
How many medically fragile children do you think you've cared for over the 22 years?
30, 35.
Bill and Judy Himmel are the most amazing people that I have ever had the privilege to work with.
Kim Coates is a volunteer, court-appointed special advocate, or CASA. Like the Himmels, she couldn't say no.
I read the file and cried my eyes out, and the next day I called and said, yeah, I'll be Brittany's CASA.
Kim's job was to look out for Brittany's best interest as a foster child in the Himmel's care.
Mom.
The Himmel's job was to give her the home, the family, the tender, loving care she never had. At first, it wasn't easy.
When she first came, she was scared. Slept with the light on, the TV on, the door open. Would assume defensive positions. Just in normal conversation, kind of actually not even conscious of it.
It was the fear of a knock on the door, the fear of not having enough food again, the fear of day and night.
The reason why I was afraid of the dark was always because I was afraid that it was going to happen again. That, you know, someone was going to come get me.
She's awakening from a nightmare that is going to play out throughout her life.
How would Brittany fight her way out of her nightmare? She was terrified of going back to her old life. Her mother, in jail for neglect, was still fighting for custody of Brittany.
Knowing the kind of horrible parent that she's been, wouldn't that be enough to just call it a day and move on with your life? But it wasn't enough. She wanted to hang on to Brittany.
Stay with us. It's been years since the night in 2003 when Brittany and her little sister became the victims of one of the most infamous crimes in Las Vegas. The once scared little girl has become stronger with a quiet confidence.
There's a tenacity about Brittany that is really incredible.
That's perfect.
She threw herself into her exercises and physical therapy, meeting and winning every challenge that came her way. And at home, she gradually began to trust her foster parents.
And then I slowly started to learn that, you know, I was safe. Nothing was happening, you know. I was like, okay, I'm not going to get hurt again.
Brittany was given a new family, new friends, a second life.
Let's go, Brittany!
So this damaged, frightened child that we were given to take care of, now is this independent, outgoing, spirited young lady that not only do we struggle to keep up with her, I actually think we're riding her coattails.
You sound like it's an honor to be Brittany's parents.
It is absolutely unique, if nothing else. And she does make us very proud.
But there was one thing missing in this warm and trusting family relationship. Brittany was still a foster child. Technically, the Himmels weren't her parents, and the court could take her away. Brittany began writing letters, to no one in particular, and leaving them around the house, hoping Judy and Bill would read them.
And the message was?
That she wanted to stay here and she wanted to be adopted.
Judy and Bill wanted it as badly as Brittany. The problem was that Brittany's biological mother, Tammy, still serving time in jail for child neglect, was fighting the adoption.
The bottom line here is that she didn't deserve to keep her. She blew the chance. She blew many chances.
So how did that make you feel when she started fighting for your custody and refusing to let you be adopted?
It made me kind of mad and made me wonder why she would want to, not want me to be happy.
Brittany wrote even more letters, this time begging her mother, Tammy, in jail to let her be adopted. But Tammy wouldn't let go, and the case dragged through the court system for years.
It seemed like we kept taking one step forward and 2 steps back, and it was really hard to see a light at the end of the tunnel with this case.
What was it like watching Brittany's hopes be dashed each time?
It was devastating for her. She couldn't go in a friend's car. She couldn't spend the night at a friend's house. Everybody had to have police checks. She couldn't just jump in and do anything she wanted to do. She was a foster kid.
But after 4 years of battling the courts, her biological mother gave up her parental rights. And finally, on a sweltering Las Vegas morning, Brittany's friends and new family gathered in family court.
And you've signed a consent saying that you would like to be adopted by Bill and Judy Himmel.
Yes.
And you think that's in your best interest.
Yes.
And you would like your name changed to Brittany Bergeron Himmel.
Yes.
It is my great and distinct pleasure to grant your petition for adoption, and your daughter shall hereafter for all purposes be known as Brittany Bergeron Himmel. Congratulations. Bless you both.
That moment when they held hands in court and I saw him tear up and Judy cry and all of us there just made me think that there are happy endings in family court.
Amazing. Finally. I'm home.
Do you feel any different today than you did yesterday?
I feel like a Himmel.
Brittany Bergeron Himmel. Each day of her new life pushes aside just a bit of those haunting memories, and she keeps moving on.
How could you ever, move on with your life after something so terrible happened to you? She not only came back from that, but she takes what's good out of that. And how can you find any good out of that? But she does. She takes the good out of that, and that's what she lives on every day. And
she's a big person. She has a big spirit, and I think that she's going to do big things.
Whatever big things she does, she has a big family to love and support her.
Some people would look at your story and say, how do you get over that? How do you survive that?
Most people do.
How did you survive it?
I think it was more that I looked at it as something that helped me come from a bad situation to a good one that made me stronger, that pushed me.
This surprisingly forgiving young lady says she still loves her biological mother, Tammy. Her attitude about being in a wheelchair is also surprising.
Overall, I think I like being in a chair better because I have a better life. Before, I didn't have such a great life,
And while she's glad the Myastases have been justly punished for killing her sister, whom she misses every day, remarkably, she says she's not angry.
Am I angry at them? I'm not. In a way, I'm kind of saying thank you because, yeah, it happened in a bad way, but it gave me a great life. Gave me a great family, great home, gave me everything. So.
Makes you teary-eyed.
A little bit.
Why?
It's just nice.
As of 2014, Bill Maestas has been unsuccessful in all of his appeals, and he remains on death row. Monique Maestas also remains in prison. Next, a young man with a buried memory and the sister who helps him uncover a terrible secret.
I was just afraid for my life, and even now, speaking to you, I'm afraid for my life.
Stay with us. The man you're about to meet was a survivor, but he didn't know it for 20 years. Who was hiding a terrible secret from him, and why? As Jamie Floyd first reported in 2000, in order to move forward, he had to unravel a mystery decades in the making.
Andre Carmichael grew up in New York City. As a boy, he was the victim of child abuse, abuse he now writes about in a journal.
My mother and brother hit me and my sister with belts, hammers, sticks, brooms, anything that she could pick up with her hands.
After several complaints of abuse, the city placed Andre and his older sister Sabrina in separate foster homes. The eldest child, Gregory, a teenager, remained with his mother. Over the years, Andre suppressed his early memories. No memories, but he did have visions.
I have visions that I had a baby playing with me when I was smaller, but I never knew who was this baby.
The visions were sketchy, but they raised questions about his past. Today, he doesn't have much from those early years, but he does have this photo, a picture of two toddlers in colorful snowsuits, a boy and girl of the same age. Andre is certain he is the boy, but who is the girl?
I felt like I was missing somebody, someone, but I didn't know what I was really missing.
Andre eventually married and started a family of his own. But even as a young man, he was still haunted by the visions. So Andre decided to find out what the visions were all about. He took the subway back to Brooklyn, where he grew up and where his mother still lived. He wanted her to see the man he had become, and he wanted some answers.
It was a chapter that I was trying to complete in my life.
He brought along his 3-year-old daughter, Andrea.
One morning, I looked at my daughter and I said, well, I think it's time for you to know your grandmother.
The Brooklyn neighborhood where Andre grew up was a tough place. Madeline Carmichael was a recluse. She locked her apartment door with 6 deadbolts and rarely left. She didn't allow visitors. And according to neighbors, she had only one friend, building super Johanna Rivera.
Really, I'm the only one who let her go inside the apartment.
In fact, when Andre and his daughter arrived at the Brooklyn apartment, Joanna had to persuade Mrs. Carmichael to open the door for her son and granddaughter. Still, Andre thought his mother was happy to see him.
We sat down, we talked, we hugged. She had offered me some dinner.
But as Andre recalls it, his mother was deeply disturbed at the sight of his daughter. So disturbed, in fact, she asked him never to bring Andrea back. Andre thought this was strange.
This is your blood. This is your granddaughter. Why would she say that? That was going back in my mind.
In his search for closure, Andre also decided to track down his older sister, Sabrina. He hadn't seen her for years, and he hoped she could answer some of his questions about his past. And he told her of his vision.
Yeah, he said he had visions of another person, but that's all he has is the visions.
Then he told Sabrina of his meeting with their mother and of her odd reaction to her granddaughter.
That's when she broke down. She told me about my twin sister.
Sabrina told Andre he'd had a twin sister named Latanisha, a little girl born 5 minutes before him at the Jewish hospital in Brooklyn, a little girl who apparently looked just like his daughter, Andrea. So this was the girl in Andre's visions, the girl in the photo. But where was she now? Then Sabrina told her brother what happened to La Tanisha one chilly autumn night 20 years before.
I recall we were sitting in the living room. Two twins were sitting down. They were in diapers. And I just remember them standing over the child, beating the child, and the child fell unconscious. And she died. So I remember.
Sabrina was 9 years old on the night she says she watched her mother and older brother murder Andre's twin sister. But Sabrina never told a soul the little girl was dead.
Why didn't you tell anyone?
I was just afraid for my life, and even now, speaking to you, I'm afraid for my life.
Why?
Why? Because these people, you don't know what these people are capable, especially the brother. As I'm talking to you, I don't know if somebody's out there waiting to take my life away from me. I'm scared.
The horror of it all was made worse by what she says they did with the body.
After they tried to resuscitate her, they got the plastic garbage bags and the mothballs, set the body up, put it in the bag, and then placed it in the trunk and into the closet.
Into the closet in the apartment where you all live?
At East 96th Street. Andre said, well, these people gotten away with this for a long time, and it's time to get justice.
So they called the Cold Case Squad, NYPD's elite squad that solves old, unsolved homicide cases. Detective Danny D'Alessandro is assigned to the Carmichael case.
Sabrina was very believable when she told the story. You could see that she had some pain in her past. And as she told the story, she would get more emotional, as far as, the details of how her mother beat the child and how her brother helped.
Just to be sure, the squad dug up Andre's birth certificate, and right there was the stunning proof that Andre was one of two babies born on February 27, 1976. But with no murder weapon and no body, a 20-year-old's case would be all but impossible to close. Lieutenant John Dove heads up the Brooklyn unit of the Cold Case Squad.
If the body wasn't there, we were going to have a problem, because a murder without a body is a pretty tough case to prove.
But then Sabrina told them something even more shocking. Latasha's body, she believed, was still in her mother's closet. Even for seasoned New York City detectives, this was hard to believe.
The opportunity to dispose of it over a period of 20 years seemed, very high to me.
Inspector Ray Ferrari, together with Lieutenant Dove and Detective D'Alessandro, went looking for the body.
We knocked on the door and we were admitted into the apartment. And Mrs. Carmichael was very surprised to see us.
And as we started opening closet doors, you could see her sense of agitation getting greater and greater. To the point where she hyperventilated, basically. The apartment had a strong mothball smell, a camphor smell that was almost unbearable. When the closet door itself was opened up, all along the bottom of the floor, there's baking soda and mothballs.
There was a trunk wrapped in plastic inside the closet, a large footlocker. It contained a second trunk inside the large footlocker, and that trunk was wrapped in plastic also. The second trunk, and as we peeled through the layers of plastic and opened the second trunk, there was a newspaper and a blanket, and then the body of the child inside.
The newspaper wrapped around the child's remains was dated November 4th, 1979.
Come on.
Nearly 2 decades after her daughter's death, Madeline Carmichael and her eldest son Gregory were charged with second-degree murder. Neighbors like Spencer Gibson vividly remember a woman haunted by the cries of a child.
No, she just said my kids are making noise. Could I cut down the noise?
And what would you say to her?
I don't have no kids here.
Johanna Rivera says Carmichael is not crazy.
But isn't there a part of you that thinks that only a crazy person could live with that body in that closet for 20 years?
I think sometimes people, they do those things like that. They don't have to be crazy. They just want to hide the secret.
A secret Andre Carmichael uncovered. Some days he wishes he hadn't.
Every day that I think about what my sister told me, it hurts me more and more to find out that I had a sister, a twin, and she was the same age as me. I feel that something was taken from me part of me, part of my heart, part of my soul.
But he finds comfort in his daughter, Andrea.
I don't look at her as my daughter, I look at her as my sister, because God gave me my sister back, but through my daughter.
Madeline and Greg Carmichael, Andre's mother and brother, were both found guilty. Madeline was given a 15-year sentence but died from bone cancer in 2002. Greg was sentenced to 7 years. As for Andre and Sabrina, they held a memorial service for the sister they knew so little about. LaTanisha was finally given a proper funeral. Coming up, a woman murdered in front of her own child.
5'4", 9 months pregnant. You killed her. You murdered her violently.
And her grieving mother faces the killer in court.
None of this makes sense.
I wanted him to look at me. I wanted him to see me.
A surprising decision when we return. A distraught mother comes face to face with the man who killed her pregnant daughter. For some, it would be payback time. But as Bob Brown first reported in 2008, what this woman said would astonish everyone.
In a Canton, Ohio courtroom, Bobby Cutts Jr., a former police officer, listened to statements of grief and anger from the family of 26-year-old Jessie Davis, the woman he had been convicted of murdering. Her father and sister were among the speakers.
5'4", 9 months pregnant. Takes a pillow, chokes her out. Whatever you did, you killed her. You murdered her violently.
It disgusts me that you sit there and she's gone. I thought that at some point I might be able to forgive you, but I hate you.
I was really angry. It just seemed like he felt no remorse. And I just kept thinking to myself, how can you take someone's life and not feel any amount of guilt for that? How do you function like that? And I was so angry that he just seemed to not care.
I don't believe that you're sorry for what you did.
Whitney Davis also knew that her mother would speak at the hearing, and that what she planned to say would be a dramatic departure from the tone the other speakers had taken.
She told me before Bobby had even been arrested that she was choosing to forgive the person that had done this to Jessie. And she said, I know it's probably hard for you to understand, but it's a decision that I have to make.
As we'll see, in what would become an extraordinary moment she feared others might misunderstand, Whitney's mother, Patty Porter, the mother of the murdered woman, stood at the podium.
The person before me had told me not to look at him, but I wanted him to look at me. I wanted him to see me.
I have had this conversation in my head with you 1,000,000 times.
What hung in the balance here was whether Patty Porter could follow through with an act of forgiveness she believed was necessary to continue with her life. And how she faced that decision is a story with an age-old theme ingrained in many religions, but which seldom reaches the magnitude of what she was asking of herself.
Well, the search is on tonight for a missing pregnant woman.
And we're then going to walk north.
Only a few months before, in June of 2007, with widespread community support, she had been searching desperately for her daughter. Jessie Davis was pregnant and missing from her home in northeastern Ohio. Bobby Cutts Jr. was one of the people who joined the search. He had fathered a son with Davis, and the boy, named Blake, then 2½, had been found alone in the house.
You could tell immediately something really horrible had happened there.
Did the child tell you anything about what had happened?
He just kept repeating that his mommy broke the table and his mommy was crying and his mommy was in the rug.
At first, as he participated in the search, Cutts denied any knowledge of the disappearance. Although he had had an affair with Davis, he was married to another woman. Then, after hundreds of people had helped in the search, Cutts changed his story and finally led police to a remote area of a nearby park where he had disposed of the body after wrapping it in a comforter, what his son Blake had mistaken for a rug. By then, the body was too decomposed to determine an exact cause of death. And Cutts claimed the death had been an accident that occurred during an argument when, he said, he elbowed Davis in her throat.
Did you believe that?
I believe it was an accident. I don't believe anything he said.
During the trial, prosecutors said they believed Cutts had committed the murder to avoid paying support for the unborn child Davis had carried nearly to full term, a girl she intended to name Chloe. Cutts was also convicted of the child's death. And now Patty Porter was preparing for an act of forgiveness that some believed should be impossible under such brutal circumstances, not far removed from the time when she had buried her daughter.
For most people, forgiveness is at the end of the grief process.
Fred Luskin is the director of the Stanford University Forgiveness Projects, one of the few projects of its kind in the world.
You feel your grief, you have the wound, you suffer for it.
I would like to thank the Lord today for such an amazing daughter.
And then, after it's run somewhat of a natural course, then I believe what we are intended to do is let it go and come back to life.
Now, if you go through life habitually forgiving everything that is ever done to you, do you risk becoming a doormat?
You do. Forgiveness is not the same as getting a lobotomy. Like, you still have to think and take care of things and act with intelligence and discrimination.
Whitney Davis said the hatred she expressed to Bobby Cutts Jr. for the murder of her sister didn't have the outcome she expected.
I mean, it really didn't do anything for me. I thought I would feel so much better after getting that off my chest, but it was just, he seemed to have no emotion or reaction to what I was saying.
Did the fact that you forgave him publicly create any kind of strain in family relations?
I was a little concerned. None of this makes sense. But I had to be true to myself.
And when Patty Porter finally faced her moment in front of Cutts, she followed through with the decision she had made.
I serve an amazing God, Bobby, a God that forgives. And I made up my mind that I would forgive you.
Porter had taken responsibility for Blake, the son that Cutts had fathered with her murdered daughter.
Let's dance.
And she believed that in an important way, Blake's life was also in the balance.
I would have never been able to raise Blake and hate you. And, Your Honor, I pray that you make a way for this man to someday be able to get out of there and to hold his son. And I hope you pray that I'm able to raise him to forgive you. He knows what you did.
There was a sign of emotion from Cutts, a tear, after Porter completed her statement. But he did not speak at this hearing.
Mr. Cutts, if you'll please stand.
And he showed no emotion when, at the age of 30, he was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole only after he has served 57 years. To Patty Porter, the focus returns to her life and to Blake's future.
I didn't think I could raise my grandson to be any kind of a man if I was full of hate and anger. My daughter would have never wanted that either. Me forgiving him didn't change anything as far as what was going to happen to him, but it changed me. And it's almost like it gave me the freedom to just mourn my daughter's loss and not feel that awful rage that happens to you when you choose not to forgive people. I was not going to let this destroy me as well.
Patty Porter reports that she and Blake are doing well. Bobby Lee Cutts Jr. remains in prison. In 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court denied his appeal. I'm John Quinones. Please join us next time for another edition of 2020 on ID.